Hey, welcome back, everyone. For many veterans and first responders, the most common question about transition is, what am I going to do next? And don't get me wrong, that's an important question. But there's another one that doesn't get the attention it deserves. Where are you going to do it? It's easy to assume that when the time comes, you'll simply find the job you want that's somewhere close to where home is now or where you plan to call home. And maybe you'll find it, but maybe you won't. Because here's the reality. Civilian opportunities aren't spread evenly across the country. Some careers exist in certain cities. Some industries are concentrated in specific regions. And depending on what you want to do after your time in uniform, the best opportunity might not be where you are today, which can be difficult to even consider that. Because moving can feel like giving up one more piece of a life that you've spent years building. But for certain, this career is going to be done one day. Then, if you have to start asking yourself whether your address has to change also, it's a lot to carry. For many veterans and first responders, this isn't really about geography. It's about familiarity. It's about your spouse's career, your children's school, your extended families and friends, and the comfort that comes from feeling like you're where you belong. Those aren't small things, and they shouldn't be treated like they are, but neither should your future. If the career you want eventually requires you to look beyond your current zip code, are you ready to have that conversation? And not after you've accepted a job, but today. Because sometimes preparing for transition isn't just preparing for what you'll be next. It's preparing for the possibility that your next might be somewhere you've not thought to call home yet. As a first responder, control isn't optional. It's how you do your job. But when it comes to buying or refinancing a home, most lenders don't get your world. Police Mortgage does. They specialize in working with first responders, walking you through the process, breaking down your options, and helping you lock in competitive rates without the runaround. Take control of your financial future with people who have your back. Visit policemortgage.com or call 312-499-8878. Police Mortgage, for first responders who are second to none. So you've spent a lot of years in a city. Maybe you grew up there. Maybe your career brought you there. It's where your kids' friends are. You know the neighborhoods. You have a favorite coffee shop. You have your gym. It's comfortable because it's familiar. And maybe you've even started taking it for granted. Now imagine that one day you start looking at what comes after you hang up the uniform. You find that position that checks all or the greater majority of the boxes. The work gives you purpose. The company has room for advancement. The compensation is solid. There's just one problem. It's 1,200 miles away. Then suddenly, the question isn't whether you're qualified. It's whether you're willing. Which is where a lot of us get stuck. Because a decision like this has little to do with a resume and everything to do with the life you'll build outside of these careers. And one of the easiest mistakes you can make is believing that this decision can wait until your transition is right around the corner. But it can't. If there's even a possibility that your next career could require a relocation, that conversation belongs with your family long before you ever even apply for a position, let alone accept the job. The worst time to ask your family if they're willing to move is after you've received an offer. So part of your transition preparation has to involve your family, and discussing the possibility of relocation gives them time also. The time to process everything, the time to ask their questions, and the time for you to decide your next move as a family. However, those conversations shouldn't begin when you're under the pressure to choose. It should begin while you still have options. Granted, you don't have to make the decision today. But you need to be preparing for that possibility that one day you'll have to, which starts with being honest about where opportunities actually exist. It's understandable to want to stay where you are. There's nothing wrong with wanting your children to finish school or wanting to stay close to your aging parents. Those are real considerations, and they deserve to be treated with respect. But there's also another question that deserves equal respect, and it might seem selfish. What if the career you want or what you're qualified for simply isn't where you're at? Sometimes we're so emotionally attached to where we live that we stop asking whether it's also the best place for where we're trying to go. This is where many veterans and first responders unknowingly create a false choice in their minds. We'll tell ourselves, either I stay where I love living or I sacrifice everything. But life usually isn't that black and white. Maybe you relocate for 5 years to gain experience and then come back. Maybe your spouse discovers new career opportunities in another city that neither of you have ever considered. Or maybe, after actually researching everything, you decide staying where you are truly is the right decision. The point is that it becomes a decision, not a reaction. However, one of our significant struggles in transition is the importance of belonging. And we often think about belonging as the people we work with, which is certainly part of it. But belonging is also tied to routines, your neighborhood, those familiar faces, the favorite restaurants, and the sports you coach. All of these things become part of your identity, which is why relocation can feel so heavy. It's not that you're just leaving a location. It can feel like you're leaving a version of yourself. And that can feel like too much change all at once. So if you fail to recognize that emotional weight, you'll probably misunderstand your own resistance. You may tell yourself, yeah, I just don't want to move. But if you dig deeper into those feelings, maybe what you really mean is, I don't want to lose one more thing. Equally though, it also means recognizing that your family may be experiencing the same emotions, just from a different perspective. Where you might be looking at the move through the lens of your next career, your spouse may be thinking about leaving a job they're not ready to leave. Or your children, maybe they're only thinking about losing their friends. Nobody is necessarily right or wrong. You're all just carrying different versions of the same decision. That's why relocation should never be treated as a career conversation, but rather a family conversation. If you haven't asked your spouse what they fear about moving, don't assume you already know. If your children are old enough to understand the ramifications, don't assume that they'll simply figure it out. Have empathy for them. Give them the opportunity to express their concerns and listen. You may find that what worries them might not be a deal breaker. And here's something else to avoid. Don't assume that another move will feel the same as previous moves, because civilian relocation is different. Yes, the job may be waiting for you. The new community might not be. That's why one of the smartest things you can do before you ever decide to relocate is begin researching what life in that new environment actually looks like. Can you actually see you and your family living there? Are all of the things that you have now readily available and accessible there? Does it have everything that your family needs, but not necessarily everything that you need? Remember, a job gives you employment and financial stability. A community gives you a life. And if you spend all your energy evaluating the first while completely ignoring the second, you may find yourself professionally successful, but personally isolated. However, before we go on, as a reminder, If you want more on this topic as well as additional transition planning and preparation, I put out a weekly newsletter. Go check out the link in the show notes to sign up, and you'll get more beneficial information beyond this episode. Now, when many of us think about transitioning, moving, well, unless you're in California, moving isn't usually what we think about. We tell ourselves, I just want to stay right here. But if you're unwilling to consider relocating, I'd encourage you to ask one more question. Why? Because sometimes we convince ourselves that we're making a practical decision when in reality we're making an emotional one. Again, there's nothing wrong with emotions. They're part of being human. But if you don't understand what's driving your decision, you might mistake fear for being rational or comfort for certainty. On the other hand, this episode isn't about whether you should move. It's about understanding what you might be protecting. I mean, if you think about your career for a minute, everything that you've achieved has probably required leaving something behind. At every stage, that growth and opportunity asks something of you. Why would your transition be any different? Whereas for many of us, we consciously or unconsciously decide that the sacrifices have to stop once we leave these careers. That somehow the next chapter should conveniently exist exactly where we already live. But that's not always how life works. Opportunity isn't personal. It's not trying to punish you. It's simply where it is. And that's a difficult truth because it removes being able to blame someone else. There isn't a department or an organization making the decision. The decision's on you. And that can actually feel heavier. In these careers, when you get orders, you can direct your frustration towards the system. But when the decision belongs to you, the responsibility belongs to you also. And that's uncomfortable. But at the same time, it's empowering. Because if you're making the decision, you also have the ability to prepare for it. However, here's another perspective that you should consider. Instead of, am I willing or unwilling to move? Ask yourself, what would it take for me to be willing to move? Would a significant raise in your salary make you move? Would you move if your spouse could transfer their career? Would you move if it meant better long-term retirement security? Those questions force you to identify your conditions instead of drawing a line in the sand without gathering the facts. And it also helps keeping your emotions in the conversation, but not in complete control of the decision. So unless you're in the middle of your exit out right now, your asset is time. Time to do research. Time to visit those cities. Time to compare the cost of living. And time to discover that a place that you maybe never considered might actually fit your family's lifestyle really well. Whereas there's also time to confirm that staying where you are might be worth the trade-offs. Either outcome is valuable because both are informed. And bottom line, the dangerous position is not choosing to stay. It's deciding to stay without honestly exploring the alternatives. That isn't being confident and assertive. That's assumption. And assuming has a way of becoming regrets. Because your identity has been mainly tied to your career and your community, and relocating can feel like you're cutting both anchors at the same time. Eventually, you're going to have to make a decision. Do you keep holding on to what's around you, or do you move into what's ahead of you? Neither choice is emotionally easy, but only one will actually move you forward. And here's another blind spot that deserves your attention. Sometimes, we assume that staying geographically close to everything familiar automatically protects us from loneliness, but it doesn't. You can retire or leave service, remain in the exact same house, drive the exact same streets, and still feel significantly disconnected. Because the thing you'll be missing isn't about the location. It's the mission. It's the shared values. It's the people who understand your sarcasm and humor without you having to explain it. However, no zip code can preserve that, which means moving away doesn't automatically create loneliness. Yet then again, staying doesn't automatically prevent it either. And that feeling of belonging, it's going to have to be rebuilt either way. So that realization can shift your focus from protecting your geography to intentionally creating community. Because if you know you'll eventually need a new tribe, regardless where you're living, then the question becomes, where can I build that life most effectively? Which also changes how you evaluate opportunities. Instead of just looking at a salary, you begin evaluating other aspects that these jobs offer. Things like, how's the community? Will my children have opportunities there? Can I picture my family building a meaningful life there, not just me earning a paycheck? Those questions acknowledge that employment is only one piece of a successful transition. Your life has to fit too. And last, there's another uncomfortable component that has to be addressed. This involves your pride. You spent your time in service defining how you're known. But moving somewhere new means becoming anonymous again, which can feel unsettling. Because having competence feels good, whereas starting over means admitting that you won't know everything again. It means asking the silly questions. It means learning new systems. It means being the new guy in the room, which is actually a bit ironic because being new wasn't weakness when you started your time in uniform. And being the new guy again won't be weakness when you're stepping out of uniform. It's simply part of growth. You've spent your career adapting to change. So don't underestimate your ability to adapt to a different environment, if that's where your future leads. The skills that have allowed you to succeed in uniform don't get turned in with all your other equipment. And they don't expire once you leave these careers. In fact, they may become the very reason you're able to build a life somewhere else that right now you haven't even imagined yet. When it comes to sunglasses, first responders and military members definitely don't baby them. They get dropped, thrown in a utility pocket, or tossed in gear bags. Frontline Optics was created for that reality. You get premium eye protection without paying designer brand prices for something that won't survive your lifestyle. From polarized UV 400 lenses to anti-reflective coatings and water-repellent finish. And here's where Frontline Optics separates themselves from the pack. When life happens and your glasses break, they offer a no-questions-asked replacement program, even for prescription lenses. On top of that, Frontline Optics was founded by a firefighter, and a portion of every purchase goes to support the First Responders Children's Foundation, helping families of those who gave everything. So if you're looking for sunglasses that look good and come from a company that actually understands the job, visit frontlineoptics.com and use the promo code TRANSITION10 to get 10% off your purchase. Frontline Optics, from a first responder for the front lines. Whether you like it or not, one day you'll take off the uniform for the last time. You probably don't know what that day will look like yet. Maybe it's years away. Maybe it's closer than you think. But when it arrives, it'll ask you, who are you willing to become next? Which might not be an easy question to answer, because becoming someone new almost always requires letting go of something familiar. And sometimes that something familiar is a place. So remember, preparing for transition isn't about predicting your future. It's about refusing to let fear make decisions before the facts have a chance to. Maybe you'll spend the rest of your life exactly where you are today. Maybe you won't. But neither outcome defines whether you've succeeded. What matters is whether you give yourself the permission to honestly consider both. You can't confuse familiarity with purpose. The street you've driven down for years isn't what gave your career meaning. The house you come home to isn't what made people trust you. And the city or county boundaries don't control your character. It's always been you. The discipline, the resilience, the integrity, and the willingness to serve something bigger than yourself. Those qualities, they don't belong to a location. They belong to you. So ask yourself, if the best opportunity for me and my family wasn't here, what would we do? And then let yourself think and consider your options. Because some of the most important decisions you'll ever make aren't made in a single moment. They're shaped over multiple conversations, asking more questions, and having a willingness to be open to possibilities before they become necessities. Your transition is going to ask you to make choices. The more you prepare today, the more those choices are in your control to make. And sometimes, that's the best advantage you can give yourself before your next chapter begins. I appreciate you staying until the end. Staying all the way through helps the engagement ratings. As always, send me your comments. Be honest with me. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. I can't make changes unless you tell me what you need. Also, please share the podcast with anyone who you think would benefit from it and enjoy it. And if you're not already, please follow the podcast wherever you're getting this episode. Stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next one.